3. I'm going to be reading from the NIV, the New International Version. If you have King James or another version, it's going to be very similar. 2 Timothy chapter 3 and the first 5 verses. But mark this. There will be terrible times in the last days. Folks, I believe with all my heart we are in the last days.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've noticed it in the last year or so, we are in terrible times. The things that we hear and see on the news and online is just astounding, the kinds of things that are going on in this world. The things that we have witnessed ourselves and had to see and know that's going on. We are in terrible times, and we are in the last days. And I'm sad to have to tell you, though, in these last days, things will get worse and worse before the Lord comes back. We haven't seen the worst part yet.
That's right.
Yeah.
Verse 2 says, people will be lovers of themselves. That's a big problem of what's going on in our country and our world. People don't care about anybody else anymore, seemingly. They only care about themselves. They talk about my rights and what God coming to me, and the government owes me a free education and free housing and free food, and it's all about me.
Yeah.
I'll go out and do what I want to. I don't care about anybody else. People will be lovers of themselves. Lovers of money. People do anything for money.
That's so true.
They did a research study here just a few years ago now, and they got a group of people and they interviewed them one-on-one, asking them what they would do for a certain amount of money. And the higher the amount of money, the more willing they would to do anything that was named. They got them up to murder. Wow. And anybody in that group said, or I should say everybody in that group said, for a certain amount of money, I would commit murder. Lovers of money.
Wow.
Boastful. Catherine and I here recently, we had some cabinetry installed in our home to update an area that we needed some cabinetry in. And one man came out and started to work on a certain day, and then a few days went by and they sent another man out. And the man spent most of his time at our home, the hours that he was there, telling us how good of a carpenter he was and how fabulous he did work and how wonderful he was, all the things that he was able to, and he just bragged and bragged and bragged on himself. And the fact is, I was about to pull my hair out because the man was doing a horrible job. And finally, at the end of the day, he gave us wrong instructions on things, and he had the wrong handles for the cabinets, and he had drilled the holes and tried to put putty in them to cover them up, and he just had a mess. And when he finally, at the end of the day, he looked at his watch, and about 4:30, he said, "Oh, it's time for me to go." And he just left. After spending an hour talking about how wonderful he was. And finally, another day, they had to send somebody else out to tear out his mess and to rebuild the cabinets. And it cost the company, I don't know how much money, to have to replace all that stuff. We're living in a time people are boastful, proud, abusive, the Bible says. Listen, they tried to tell us about 3-4 decades ago that we're going to allow abortion in this country because if every child is a wanted child, there'll be no more child abuse. Do you realize child abuse is at its worst peak that it's ever been in the history of the world? It is unbelievable the child abuse that goes on in this generation. See, because we've aborted babies from the womb didn't make it more valuable. It made life cheap, disposable. For any reason and for no reason, you can kill the babies. It made life cheap. And abuse is out the wazoo, not only the children, but the spouses and the people and every group of people. Abuse is amazingly, phenomenally, overwhelmingly taking over the world. The Bible says in verse 2, people are going to be disobedient to parents. Now, does anybody need me to talk about how children are not obedient to their parents anymore? Disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy. Verse 3 says, without love, unforgiving, slanderous. Have you watched anything politically lately? Nothing but slander. People aren't for a candidate, they're against candidates. Without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good. Verse 4, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. I got a rude awakening here. It's been about 10 years ago. See, I grew up in church. I've been in church all my life. Every Sunday morning for all my life, I've been in church. But about 10 years ago, I had an engagement that I needed to speak in Virginia. And I was living in North Carolina, near the South Carolina border, at Native American Bible College. And so I went to church on Sunday morning, but I had to leave after Sunday school because I was speaking in Virginia that night and it was going to take me that long to drive there. And so I left at 11 o'clock at the end of Sunday school, and normally service would have started at 11 o'clock. And I got in my car and drove a little ways, and I drove past Walmart. And the parking lot was full on Sunday morning during church time. And place after place I went by, there were people everywhere. And I don't know if you've ever driven along on your way to church and how many boats you might pass someday on the way to the lake. Or people headed up to the mountains, not that far to the mountains from here. People going, see, we're living in a time where people are lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. Verse 5, having a form of godliness, but denying its power. And the Bible says then, that sounds almost strange to us as evangelicals, believing you need to reach everybody. It says, have nothing to do with such people.
That's right.
Don't even have anything to do with these kinds of people. That's mentioned to us here. And we're in 1 Timothy chapter 3, looking at those first 5 verses.
Yeah.